Dr. Eric. Welcome back to the Rest Room Recovery Podcast. Second time offender, so welcome.
Good to be an offender.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. You're always a gracious host, and it's always a lot of fun. So I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. So the first time we covered kind of a broad topic on fitness, and specifically towards men, and we had talked about kind of taking it maybe the next layer down or cover a few things more specifically. And when we're talking about men's health, prostate kind of comes to mind. And we finished the dialogue on uncomfortable conversations and basically around things that, we just need to put out in the light and just talk about it so that we can uncover things and we don't need to live a less fulfilled life, really, in that almost category. And so like ED category.
Absolutely. Men are notoriously bad at expressing themselves or getting help when there's an issue. I mean, fortunately with ED, most men will come in because that's, they could be, overweight and they have all these health issues, but until they're having problems with sex, they won't come in. That's a big issue to them, But even then, there's a lot of guys that are embarrassed. They won't come in, or their spouses bring them in for hormonal issues or weight issues or whatever. I mean, it's like that in the preventive health, and I saw it all the time when I was an ER doctor. I mean, the guys got, especially, where I was in kind of in the rural area, and the hardworking blue collar guys and farmers, they would be dying. They'd have to be dying for their wives to finally drag them in. And of course, I'm asking them, what's wrong? Anything hurt? No, I'm fine. I look at his wife. He's like, oh, he was complaining about crushing pain and and he didn't say a word. It's like, so this is a common issue. And you're right. Men need to be able to be willing to talk. Women will talk all day about what's wrong. They'll share and get in groups.
Yep.
And men need to be open about it for sure.
Yeah, and there's that tension between grin and bear it, but then there's also like when you need to just step up and step into a doctor's office of some sort to address it. Absolutely. So kind of to that point, what are some of the things based on my reading between prostate health and ED? There's obviously correlation, same general area. Sure. Maybe we start with that aspect of what are the things that can kind of lead toward that, or those leading indicators?
Yeah, sure. So I think with erectile dysfunction or ED, as we were just talking about, it's a common issue, and obviously a lot of guys will think of it, oh my gosh, I can't have sex, I can't get it up or whatever, and that gets them in the door, which is good because it's kind of like getting an eye exam, right? It's kind of like a window into your soul or window into the inner workings of your body. It's like the canary in the coal mine, I guess, all these analogies, but because typically it all comes down to blood flow. And with patients, it's all about, as we all know about nowadays, we're learning more about metabolic diseases and the problems with chronic inflammation and oxidative stress and wear and tear in our bodies because we're a stressed out society. We're exposed to all these toxins, et cetera, et cetera. So inflammation is huge. And of course, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of men and women. And oftentimes if a guy's having issues with blood flow down there, he's probably having issues in blood flow elsewhere, meaning his heart, his brain, his kidneys, everywhere else. He could be, if you look at him, if you actually take the time, they probably have slightly elevated blood pressure. They may have some elevated markers on their blood work, which indicates a pre-diabetic state, or they're overweight. They're showing signs of visceral fat accumulation, which obviously portends that they may have, some atherosclerosis, which of course all these things can lead to metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease. So I always explain it's kind of like a plumbing system, right? The heart's a bunch of pipes and tubes. It goes out to all your organs and fingers and everything. And as they get further away, they get smaller and smaller. When you get to your fingers and your penis and everything else, they're pretty darn small. So It doesn't take much to block them. So if it's getting blocked off, again, that's a sign. It's an early warning indicator, kind of like your car engine lights going off, right? So So for me, it's obviously I want to get them performing, but I want to get them healthy too. I want to screen them for all these other issues. And when I bring all these things up, they're like, oh yeah, well, prostate, not usually as vocal of a thing, meaning it doesn't often become symptomatic per se. A lot of guys, if you ask them, will say, oh yeah, I'm going to the bathroom a bunch of times in the night, or I'm dribbling, or can't get a good stream. But to them, you're like, no big deal. But once again, if you ask those probing questions, you can dig a little deeper. Maybe it's happening more than they think, or maybe it is affecting their urination or their erections and things like that. And again, it's kind of that early warning, because you got to think about serious things like prostate cancer and things like that. So so those are kind of like basically my early warning lights to kind of gives me an excuse to get in front of them and present all these issues and really be more of a preventive, proactive approach to them.
Yeah, and although it's getting notice, we were joking before we started. I've grown a beard at the moment, and November is almost upon us, like No Shave November, and it's kind of men's health focused. But prostate seems like it's just kind of glossed over in many ways. Even when it comes to cancer, a lot of times it's like, oh, it's not a big deal for whatever reason. At least that's my interpretation.
Yeah, you're right. And because a lot of other things get a lot more press, right? And when we were talking earlier about men and women being vocal, well, women are very vocal. Everybody knows the pink ribbon, right? Everybody hears about breast cancer and other cancers, but with prostate cancer, it's kind of like the ugly stepchild, right? It's like nobody really gives it its fair shake, but unfortunately, it is very common.
Yeah.
Most guys, if they live long enough, they probably will get it at some point because it's 1 in 3, 1 in 5 men, somewhere in that range. It's a very common malignancy. Fortunately, it's usually, if caught early, could be treated. It's more of a slow grower, but sometimes it could be pretty quick. But yeah, it's often forgotten about. And who knows that just because, guys just don't talk about it, they kind of keep it hush hush versus everyone else who's vocal about everything else. That's a possibility. But you're right. It's actually more common than what people think and highly preventable too. So
with prostate, so is there any correlation between some of the things related to like lower testosterone levels? Is there a connection point there?
Actually, there is. Yeah. I mean, it's most people think of, like, obviously guys have to get their, prostate exams, once a year, once they hit a certain age, and kind of get a feel. Literally, a physician has to feel and see if it's enlarged, or there's nodules or anything, but it's just more of a rough screen. Of course, everybody knows about getting lab work, like what's the PSA is the common one. And that's usually the first indicator it's going to rise. But again, it's not always super specific or sensitive, meaning that it can be high and it could be a totally normal exam, or it might be normal and they could still be harboring a cancer, but it's still overall decent screening tests. It's really all we have. But as you mentioned with testosterone, yes, studies now have indicated that the lower your testosterone level, the higher the incidence of having, if you have cancer, it's going to be more aggressive and a worse stage when it's picked up. So the original, decades ago, it was thought that, oh my gosh, guys have prostate cancer, oh, we got to drop their testosterone. They would basically medically castrate these men to drop their testosterone to zero. And yeah, it would help,
Wow.
but not for the reasons that what's thought of. It gets a little complicated, but the bottom line is once it gets, it's really low. Like typically we're talking in the 200s. Once it gets above 200s, if your testosterone is above, it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect that cancer growth, even if you have it. But what they've done since then, they've done hundreds of, dozens and dozens of studies since then showing that actually it's the flip side. The lower your testosterone, the worse your prognosis is if you have it, and probably the less likely you're going to have it. If your testosterone is higher, less of a chance you're going to have it. And if you have it, it's going to be less aggressive. So
Okay.
it's actually, I don't want to say it's protected, but it's definitely in your favor to have a higher testosterone levels. Lower testosterone levels have clearly been associated with worse prostate cancer score and higher aggressiveness, as well as other issues, of course, like we talked about before in terms of, prediabetes, insulin resistance, inflammation, cardiovascular disease. Testosterone is shown to be inversely related to all these. So in other words, the higher your testosterone, the lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, of osteoporosis, prostate cancer, early death, all these things. And when they've done intervention studies, here's a guy with this, here's a guy, when we give him testosterone, when you compare them head to head, it's a no-brainer. But there's still that old stigma out there that, oh, testosterone causes prostate cancer, but it does not.
So when it comes to, so it's an inverse relationship is what you're saying. Like, so
Correct.
like you said, you want a higher T level than.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You want it to be higher for sure. Having it lower is not going to benefit you at all. Some people will say, oh yeah, look at, teenagers, right? They have the super high testosterone levels for, 10, 20 years, and they don't have any prostate cancer, right? If it was all from testosterone, all these teenagers would be having prostate cancer. Of course, it's more than that. It's inflammation. It's all these, us getting older, all these, it's not just hormone levels, but in a way, it does make sense when they make that argument. But again, then when they studied head to head, they've shown it to be not the case. The guys with the lower testosterone levels have not only technically more cancer, but when they do get it caught, it's more aggressive for sure.
Okay. So you talked about, a couple different things, and I think we touched on last time too, but I've heard the term, metabolic dysfunction a lot
Right.
lately. And it seems to be like, I won't say newer, but a newer conversation piece around wellness.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it as it relates to the prostate. So maybe unpack that metabolic syndrome just real quick to kind of draw on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, metabolic abnormalities and what they call classically the metabolic syndrome it's one of the bigger problems in today's society between that and insulin resistance. Unfortunately, what is it? I forget the statistics, but it's, almost half or more than half the population is either insulin resistant or pre-diabetic or both, when you lump them all together, which is a staggering number. But metabolic syndrome is when people have an insulin resistance, typically elevated blood pressure, triglycerides are elevated, their HDL is low, and then they have, often they're obese, typically, not always, but usually basically it's a dyslipidemia, meaning that your cholesterol markers are the opposite of where you need them to be. Your HDL is low, your triglycerides are high, etc. Your insulin resistance, so you're on the track to becoming pre-diabetic. Your blood pressure tends to be elevated, and oftentimes there's some visceral fat accumulation, and all these things basically portend. That's once they get into that group, it's called the metabolic syndrome, because those are the people that unfortunately go on to get diabetes and to get true hypertension or high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. And like we talked about earlier, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of men and women. So you're on that fast track to getting that. And that metabolic syndrome is part of it. And inflammation plays a huge role in all those disease processes. But that's the metabolic issue that we're dealing with here.
And it seems like, at the end of the day, as blood related, right? It's it seems like it's the health of the blood that's flowing through your system or not flowing to get to the key areas to give it the energy and the nutrients it needs.
Yeah, well, yeah, blood flow is crucial for sure, but even more than that, it really comes down to the cell. I'm really, myself and a lot of my colleagues are really focused on treating health, and that's why I named my thing, primex cellular nutrition and fitness, because I'm trying to focus on treating the cell. Because if all these diseases, everything starts somewhere, right? You have organs and then tissues, and at the microscopic level, it's the cell. Inside the cell are the mitochondria, a little powerhouse that generate energy. And if that cell is working efficiently and properly, there's not going to be a problem. The cell will keep replicating, and if it becomes dysfunctional, it'll kill it off and grow new healthy cells. But unfortunately, when things go awry, again, from whether it's from diet, from toxins, from poor lifestyle, hormonal abnormalities, etc., the cell is not getting what it needs. Maybe it's missing micronutrients or exposed to too many toxins or too much sugar and insulin, etc. It starts to become dysfunctional. All that machinery inside that little cell starts to misfire, and then something stops working. There's not enough energy production, or too many free radicals, which cause DNA damage, and then those things get replicated, and slowly the machine gets gunked up. So instead of operating at 90%, 100% capacity, now it's at maybe 60% capacity. So things now start to go a little haywire, and that spreads, and that's when inflammation comes in, and it's like a fire. It just slowly spreads to other cells. Then all the cells start getting dysfunctional, even if they're not, dead, even if they're only 50%. Now all the cells, now all the tissues, now all of a sudden you got a whole organ that's not working properly. And of course that affects everything else. So it's a vicious cycle. But it all comes down to the cell, treating the cell. And once things get messed up, then it kind of logarithmic growth, it just takes off from there.
Yeah. So what are some things that, we talk about nutrition, obviously you talk a number of things, but some of the mitigation strategies to, reinvigorate, I'll call it the cellular function.
Yeah. I mean, there's a million, there's a lot of things. Fortunately, most of it comes down to healthy lifestyle, right? Which is, it's simple, but it's not easy. I think, biggest thing, well, there's multiple. Obviously, I always start with sleep and stress. I call it my double S, Superman, Spider-Man, right? So, if you're not sleeping, I don't care what else you're doing. You could be on the magic pill and things are going to go off. Your hormones are going to be off. Your mitochondria are not, what we talk about, not going to be firing efficiently. It's going to throw everything out of whack. So sleep is crucial. Stress mitigation is crucial. Obviously, diet, exercise, lifestyle, all those things come into play, because unfortunately we live in a very toxic world where our soil is depleted of nutrients. Processed food is everywhere. Sugar and chemicals is in the air. It's in our cleaning products. It's in our carpets. We're bombarded with all these xenoestrogens and plastics and all these things that are affecting us on a cellular level, like we talked about, and damaging our DNA, affecting our hormones. So it's a huge uphill battle. So, it really comes down to being as clean as you can. So, solid sleep, solid nutrition, avoiding as much as you can the plastics, the artificial processed foods, trying to eat clean, organic, whole food as much as you can. Regular exercise and stress mitigation, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, all these things. Yes, exercise is key. And then of course, other things too. Those are like kind of the foundational principles, but of course we add to that with, no matter what, my hormones are still off, or maybe the damage is done. We need to fix your hormones, or maybe there's a micronutrient deficiency, which is very common. Like we talked about with the toxic environment, all these cells, going back to the cell, if you think about it, back in science, we all learned the Krebs cycle, or the energy cycle that produces energy, right? And they all need micronutrients. For example, some of the B vitamins are crucial, B1, B2, B3, selenium, we need iron, we need all these different little micronutrients, which magnesium, all these things that oftentimes are depleted. We don't think of that, but if you're just not getting your basic micronutrients and minerals, those things can't work. Those are, that comes before things like curcumin and green tea and, the cool new tropical fruit of the day, right? You got to get the basics. We need, and, if you look on the charts of these things, it'll show you the exact cofactors and minerals that are needed to run these little cycles inside the cell. Like I said, the very basics, vitamin C, magnesium, all the B vitamins, et cetera, et cetera. There's a list of those, and those are just foundational. So it doesn't have to be that difficult. Between a whole food diet and maybe some very minimal supplementation, you can give your body what it needs on a cellular level. And then, of course, you're managing everything else, like with the basic stuff, the sleep, the stress, exercise. Et cetera. Those are foundational. And, trying to be clean as much as we can. And we could talk about this too, in terms of, air, the air we breathe, the water we drink and are exposed to. Not food is one, that's a whole category, but then we get into things like air, air quality, pollution, all the unfortunately carpets and our bedding and everything has all these different chemicals in them, right?
That could be a whole nother discussion.
That's a whole nother discussion. The water we drink, is it what's in there? Is there fluoride? Are there other heavy metals? Not just what you're drinking. You say, well, I've got a filter. Okay, but what about your shower? Do you have a filter on your shower? Yeah. Most people don't. And then they're breathing that in or getting it in their mouth, and that every single day of the year, that adds up.
Yeah, and your skin is your largest organ, and
you're
spending a few minutes in a shower with some water that's heavy and whatever.
Yeah,
it actually is going to influence you significantly.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Dirty electricity, right? Wi-Fi, turn off your Wi-Fi at night. Try to minimize your exposure to Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. People walk around with the little Beats or the little earbuds in the air. They're bombarding their brain with that Bluetooth technology. That's not good either. Just little things like that. And it all, eating out of glass and storing things in glass and metal instead of plastics. Just little things all those things add up, little things that you can do.
Yeah. It kind of relates to the thing I jokingly say is pennies add up to dollars, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's the compounding interest principle that happens both positively and negatively.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
So are you familiar? So we were talking about kind of blood flow around ED, prostate health. Are you familiar with like PEMF tools, electromagnetic pulsing?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I've not personally used them. In our clinic, we treat a lot of patients a lot of men with erectile dysfunction. Now we use a lot of shockwave therapy, which is, things like, it's called the Gainswave device. Of course, there's been several knockoffs since then. But it's kind of like the Cadillac of them. It uses intense pulse sound waves to treat, basically break up the plaque. We talk about the arteries, they can get hardened or full of plaque or get some scar tissue, and it literally breaks that up and opens the tubing, breaks up those little plaques and scar tissue, and also stimulates the body to get what's called angiogenesis, which means growing new little blood vessels. Okay. It's all about the blood flow, right? Yeah. So between the Gainswave technology and things like PRP therapies, we call it the P shot, and it's been around for a while, where you're actually taking your body's own stem cells, or actually growth factors and exosomes and peptides inside these little platelets inside these little growth factors in your blood, and you're literally injecting it into the penis. And again, it's stimulating new blood vessels, new tissue growth, and it's healing. I can talk about PRP more if you want, but those are the two things that I found most successful in our practice for treating ED directly treating the cause. In other words, reversing that plaque and getting better blood flow, because you can pop a pill and do these things, you're just covering it up. But these things are actually treating the source. So PEMF, probably, it's a whole different technology, but I've been reading and hearing a little bit more about it of late. And there's some devices out there that can be used locally on the arms and legs. There's whole body PEMF, all kinds of cool little things.
Yeah, there's a couple of brands I'm familiar with. One in particular is the Beamer, where it's like an at-home device, and you do different ones. And we recently got one actually and just started using it. So I don't know if I've noticed anything yet per se, but yeah, I was just curious, just knowing that it's a microcirculation device. That's the intent, is that aid in the blood flow and the capacity. So
for sure, yeah. There's one called the Flex Pulse that I was at a conference a couple weekends ago with some colleagues of mine, and I think the Flex Pulse is one that was talked about. You've got these these things like the chargers. Have you heard about like the human chargers and like the things that use light technology and different things for brain health and things? But yeah, all kinds of cool stuff. But yeah, that was the one they talked about, like an at-home device you could use for the PEMF, which it looks like from what I've seen, it has a lot of benefits and not much downside.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so what are some of the kind of well, we just touched on it, but fixes or mitigations to support support it aside from, enhancing your nutritional intake?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of ED, obviously, as with everything, prevention is the best strategy, right? So like you mentioned, optimizing your blood flow, make sure you have good circulation, you have good tissue health, cellular health, like we were talking about, keep that blood flow up. Obviously, if you're doing bad things like smoking or, eating crappy food, man, you got to fix that. Stop smoking, eat clean, exercise, get the blood flow. You got to get things moving, movements, functional movement, not just hitting the gym is vitally important. And like we talked about, reducing inflammation is key. Reducing that inflammation and giving our body what it needs from a nutrient perspective, good oxygen, good nutrients, micronutrients, hormones, and keeping away the bad stuff, all the toxins and the inflammation, right? So like we talked about, if you're eating, not exercising, you're eating processed foods, you're staying up all night, you're stressed to the max. Even if you feel, I'm okay, I can power through it. Well, you're not. You're damaging. You're causing inflammation. Whether it's your adrenal glands or just overall stress, or you're getting some insulin resistance, you're slowly getting it. And then you're getting inflamed somewhere. And that's over time that adds up. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, now something shows up, but you got to catch it early. So it's about reducing that inflammation, optimizing your blood flow, giving your body what it needs and taking away what it doesn't need. So with ED, that's about it. So exercise, nutrition, blood flow, movement, micronutrients. And then of course, again, most of my guys are, late 30s, 40s and up. So of course, yeah, there's always some hormonal issues. Unfortunately, men's testosterone is dropping, and I'm seeing even younger and younger guys coming in with it because of all the factors we talked about. I'm seeing guys 20s, 30s and 40s with testosterone levels of guys that normally I'd see in their 70s and 80s. It's bad. So that has to be corrected too. It's a multi-pronged approach. And then of course we get into things I mentioned, the gains wave, the P shots and things like that to directly treat it. And oftentimes I'll do everything. If somebody's pretty severe, we'll do it all. Get them on a nutrition plan. We'll give them, we'll correct their hormones. We'll do these interventions like directly to get the blood flow going. Sometimes it's a full court press.
Yeah. Now we are talking about ED, but does utilization influence the functionality?
Use it or lose it, baby. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. A lot of time, so we'll give our guys, we'll give them a pump. We'll give them a penis pump. If we give them the P shot or the gains wave and say, you need a pump, I want you to pump twice a day for at least 6 to 8 weeks. And, a lot of guys will use it indefinitely. You don't need it if you can get your own erection, great. But for those guys that can't, a lot of studies have shown it does increase the blood flow down there. You're getting the blood, you're getting fresh oxygenated blood into the tissue. You're getting the bad blood out and it's circulating. That's what it's all. If it's just kind of sitting there, stagnant blood, it's not doing much, right? So you want to get the fresh blood in there, stimulate the nitric oxide, which stimulates more dilation of the blood vessels to get even more oxygen in there. So just like breathing, right? You want to make sure, most people don't breathe properly, right? That's a whole nother conversation. But, belly breathing, getting oxygenating your brain and your body. Most people are not doing that. They think they are, but they're not. When you start breathing properly, you do notice a little bit of a difference. So breathing properly, movements, getting that blood flow. And yeah, if we have to use a pump, use a pump. Yeah. And so I tell my guys, once you're able to have sex, have it as many times you want. Some guys will, or if they're singing, you got to do what you got to do, but, get the blood flow going, so.
Right. Yeah, no. And you mentioned nitric oxide and, it's and breathing. And that's an area that I've been discovering over the last, probably year. And nasal only breathing enhances the level of nitric oxide in your body. And so there's
definitely,
the breathing mechanics and breathing exercises, I would presume can aid or be an contributing factor in supporting that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I've been trying to do that as well. It's hard to do it all day. I try to do it during the day. I even try to do it during my workouts. I still oftentimes exhale with my mouth open because I'm breathing so hard, but I try to breathe in through your nose because, like you said, when you breathe in through your mouth, there's no nitric oxide through your nose. For whatever reason, the sensors and the tissue in there creates nitric oxide when it's exposed to oxygen. So breathing in your nose, you're going to generate more nitric oxide, which is going to dilate your blood vessels everywhere. Obviously, it'll help with your workouts, help with erections and everything else. So yeah, belly breathing and nasal breathing is great. Yeah, I too have recently been learning a lot about breathing techniques, things like box breathing and
Yeah.
4-5-7 breathing, or of course Wim Hof. Everybody knows about Wim Hof breathing too. If
Yep.
you've never tried that, that is a wild feeling, because you actually do get more oxygen in the tissue. And not to get geeky, but when your carbon dioxide level goes high from holding your breath, your body senses that, and it actually makes the blood, or the oxygen in your blood, more likely to release itself to the tissue. So you can oxygenate your tissues better by having elevated CO2 levels. So that's kind of the premise. You take deep breaths for 20, 30 times, and you exhale and you hold it as long as you possibly can. And then you slowly breathe and you repeat that. You feel the tingling, and you feel it. And then, so getting some deep breaths, even if you're just, like you said, just nasal breathing all day long, breathing from your belly, that can make a big difference.
Yeah. I've been, the group I've been following is Brian McKenzie. It's now Shift Adapt is
Okay.
the group, but he comes back from the CrossFit background. Anyway, he's been doing a lot of work on breath work and with some foundations.
Awesome.
Another one is Patrick McEwen.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I'll have to share some notes offline. Then you have to read a little bit more about that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what other things are maybe interrelated or interdependent on this aspect of men's health? Are there other components that we haven't touched on yet that might influence or support?
Well, that's, one. And then, of course, we talked about the prostate. And as you mentioned, they're in the same area, and it is same thing. Everything we talked about will, of course, help the prostate too. Unfortunately, a lot of guys do get prostate enlargement over time, no matter what, even doing all these healthy things. And that's just something that's going to happen, but that can be handled. Usually not a terrible issue. But again, it's something, to be monitored for sure. So all my guys, I'm always getting PSAs on them, and checking those things. We're doing physical exams on them regularly to screen for that as well. But I think the biggest thing is, as we talked about with metabolism and everything else, anything that can get them in the door gives me a chance to address all these issues, because, again, men don't tend to want to talk about that very much, or, oh no, my blood pressure's fine, or my diet's okay. Oh yeah, what'd you eat today? Let's look at your blood sugar. Let's look at all your cholesterol markers. And you're not eating so good after all. All right, kind of thing. And of course, obviously I'm all about hormonal fitness, so I'm big on the hormones, but I look at it from a bigger picture. I mean, like I said, I always look at the nutrition, the fitness, the nutrients, but of course I address the hormones, because that's a crucial piece, especially in the demographic that I'm treating. And it's not just about testosterone, right? We're looking at insulin, cortisol, estrogen in men is very important. Thyroid, we could talk about thyroid too. That's adrenal health. Those are all things that sometimes get glossed over.
Yeah. So maybe pull on that thread is the thyroid a little bit, because the adrenal piece is definitely a key factor around energy and vitality.
Oh, for sure. The thyroid and adrenals, they work together. And sometimes it can be hard to distinguish what's the problems with the adrenals or the thyroid, or is it both? Because they do kind of play in the same box together, so to speak, and they affect each other. If your adrenal health is off, that affects everything in your body. And I think there's more awareness of that. There's a lot of, people talking, and, blogs and et cetera. People talk about adrenal health and what they call adrenal fatigue, even though it's not technically a medical diagnosis, but the symptoms are real for sure. Thyroid, again, too. I did a couple videos recently. I think I posted them on Instagram, and I'm kind of like things that have been forgotten through the years. History is, I like history stuff too. And I've been going back and reading a lot of older medical texts from years gone by, even as late as the 1800s, because back then they didn't have all these fancy CAT scans and lab tests. They had to follow patients along for years and years and treat them based on their symptoms, which is what I try to do, is treat the patient, not the lab work. Because if you're having all the symptoms of thyroid and all your lab work is quote unquote normal, I don't care. You've got some thyroid issues. And that's a big thing. So a lot of these greats of the past, Dr. Ostler, Dr. Broda Barnes, all these doctors, and that's what they did. And if you go back and read all their case studies, it's fascinating. Everybody thinks of thyroid as, I've got dry skin and I'm tired and I'm gaining weight. Well, yeah, but there's more to it. Migraines, people have frequent sinus infections or frequent allergies, menstrual irregularities, changes in how tall they are, their weight, so there's a huge laundry list of things. When you read through, you're like, wow, of course, thyroid affects everything in your whole body. It manages the metabolism everywhere. Yeah. So people, you start picking up on these things. If you really start fine tuning it, someone's got some their nails are kind of ridged, their face is kind of puffy. They're losing some hair on the outside of their eyebrows. They're gaining some weight. They're having headaches all the time. They get sick every year. How many people do you know that every year they get 2 or 3 colds and bronchitises, allergies, rashes, eczema, ADHD, migraine headaches? How many women do you see who have your crazy menstrual cycles? They're out of whack.
Yeah.
A lot of it very well could be thyroid. And most people don't think about the thyroid, but again, if you look back at history and you read all these medical journals of cases where they followed these thousands of patients they treated successfully with either adrenal help or thyroid help, it's fascinating. And it's kind of like the lost art of medicine, I think. So nowadays, a lot of traditional practitioners, and I was there, you don't have time to look at all these things. And let's just look at your labs. Oh, labs are normal. You're feeling okay. Okay, here's a prescription for this. Well, there's more to it. And that's why I do what I do. I don't do the traditional model anymore because I can sit with my patient for like an hour or more and really dig deep on all these things. So thyroid is one that's, I think, sometimes glossed over. Same with adrenal health. I think so many people, like we talked about earlier, are stressed, they're not sleeping, they're burning the candle at both ends, and their adrenals are, they're kind of pitching a fit, right? And then that, why is my female and male hormones off? Why am I gaining weight? Well, maybe it's not because of low T. Maybe it's your T's down because your thyroid's down, your growth hormone's down, everything's down because your adrenals are messed up. And let's fix that. And then once we fix that, bam, there we go. It's kind of like when I see people that are just working out and dieting. And I tell them, take a week off and I want you to eat more, but I'm gaining weight. I want you to eat more. And then 3 weeks later, they come in like, holy shit, I lost, 10 pounds. I shed all this weight. I mean, I feel so much better. Yeah. You gave your body what it needed, so, it's just different way of thinking. So, so those two are huge, for sure. And like I said, kind of often forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems. I think I had a conversation with another guest around kind of the counterintuitive nature to health at times when it comes to food, because we've been inundated with a particular prescription of nutrition and diet and completely hijacked the term diet, which is really at the end of the day your lifestyle,
right?
Around what to expect. But like sometimes you need to eat more to lose to get the system working more effectively.
Right, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Your body, you're taking it away, and your body's just getting that metabolic compensation. It's slowing down. That's why their thyroid's low, because it's slowing down. Your body perceives it as a threat, so it's trying to save itself. So our bodies are very, very smarter than we are, if that makes sense. But they're going to try to preserve itself and save the necessary functions and forego everything else. So sometimes you just have to listen and get tuned to your body. I think that's the hardest part. I think is learning to listen to your body. If you're tired, don't hit the gym as hard as you thought you were going to, or maybe you're going to fast, but you're just tired and got a headache and your belly's growing. Well, maybe you shouldn't fast. Listen to your stomach. You know what I mean? So, when you're full, try to stop when you're maybe 80% full, and don't go all the way. Listen. And am I really hungry, or am I just thirsty, or am I just bored? And that takes time. I'm still learning that after decades of being attuned to my body, picking up little subtle clues. And that's probably the hardest thing. But if you can get that, and even, I don't want to say master, but get a handle on it, that goes leaps and bounds in terms of taking you to the next level. So if you can listen to your body and all its signals, you'll do the right thing. And then you're going to go down the right path instead of down the wrong path.
Yeah. I think there's two key takeaways on that. Is one, patience in the whole process. As much we've gotten used to the quick fix or the spontaneous recovery. And then, just like you said, listening to yourself, and just acknowledge that.
Yeah. And you're right. It's a long game, and it takes time. But it's just like, you want to, put on, 10 pounds of muscle, or you want to drop 20 pounds, you can do it, but it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Take your time and slowly get there. Don't try to hijack it and, crush it, in the first month, because then it's just going to backfire.
Well, on a personal note, I mean, a little different take on it too is creating margin in your life. I think we've also jam-packed our schedules so much, and the advancement of technology has helped in many ways, but it helps us also do like 12 things where it used to be like 4.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's, that's a great point. And I think it's something about, you just have to take a step back and kind of prioritize things and kind of structure your day, like think of your ideal day and try to structure as close to that as possible and back those things into it. Like I try every night to, an hour before bed, kill the electronics. I got my blue blockers on. I try just to chill, maybe read a book, whatever. I try to make that my reading chill time. And no matter what, I'm not going to do work. I'm not going to get on the computer, whatever. When I get up in the morning, I'm going to take my cold shower. I'm going to go downstairs and, whatever, write down my goals, whatever that is, get in, just like anything, habit. It takes practice, but once you do it 20, 30 times, now it's your new good habit. And I think if you, like you said, if you set those boundaries up, yeah, I'm going all day, but boom, 8:00, I'm, with my wife or my husband, or 7:00, I'm with the kids, 8:00 with my spouse, 9:00, I go to bed, whatever that is, just set those rules and just stick to it. And then, cause otherwise, like you said, distractions are everywhere. It's like, oh, it's on my phone, or, oh, it's on the TV, or who's that, whatever, distractions are everywhere. So you got to learn to tune that off.
Yeah. Cause that's a contributing factor to that adrenal aspect of the constant, bombardment on our,
for sure,
system, our parasympathetic and sympathetic system. So
definitely.
So to try and kind of tie up, what are kind of 3 key takeaways for guys out there listening, to step forward in their health around prostate and ED?
I think that one of the biggest things is just kind of like we just talked about, listen to your body, swallow your pride, and pay attention. Listen to what your friends and family are telling you, listen to what your body's telling you, and really kind of look at yourself from the third person as much as you can. We've all done it, right? You're like, I'm tired, like, oh, screw it, I'm going to work out anyway. Or what's that kind of nagging ache? Whatever, it'll be all right. It's going to go away, but it's still there. Well, okay, maybe it's time to pay attention to that. Or your wife's always like, honey, you're always saying that, you're kind of sore, your lower back is sore, or, whatever, just, okay, maybe I should take care of that, instead of just blowing it off, listen, like we say, 2 ears, one mouth, right? We should listen twice as much as we speak. So listen to your spouse, listen to your body, swallow the pride, and just pay attention, take care of yourself. What you got to do. But again, most guys are just kind of like, just trying to steamroll through it and be the big burly guy and power through it. But sometimes that's not the best answer.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like too, one other thing would be, finding the right doctor. You talked about your practice. I think your practice is pretty unique on how you address the client or the patient and really digging in. How do you, well, aside from contacting you, how would somebody go through evaluating, the right doctor if they've gone to their general practitioner historically? And it seems like,
yeah,
kind of blown off.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing is if you're not getting your questions answered, if something's still not right, and you say, okay, I went to my doctor and he said everything's normal. Well, I still am tired. I'm gaining weight. I'm craving salt. I can't sleep through the night. Whatever that may be. My belly's getting thicker. I'm still putting on weight. Well, and if he didn't answer that, didn't give you some actionable things that you can do, well, maybe you should ask around. And so okay, well, where do I go? Well, is it a functional medicine or a homeopathic doctor? Is it a hormone specialist like myself? Whatever that may be, we can all do different things, but the easiest thing is try to do with one person, someone who could do everything, right? So, and I'm not saying my way is the right way, but because I know a lot of other people who are not, maybe they're just a functional practitioner, a naturopathic doctor, and they're very good at what they do, or a nurse practitioner. But sometimes you need someone who has delved deep into that stuff and actually, walks the walk and talks the talk and has done the training and the certification, not just someone who just he's online and Instagram and says, and they're just, oh, well, I read all these studies, right? And I've interviewed all these people, therefore I'm an expert. I know a lot of non-medical people, giving advice all the time, kind of medical advice, when they really shouldn't be, because they think it's simple. If you just, read a bunch of books and read a bunch of studies, you know what to do. But like we were talking about earlier, the art of medicine, it's way deeper than that. Right. The stewardess doesn't go up and fly the plane, right? Could she? Maybe, but there's probably a lot more she thinks she knows, but she doesn't. There's layers and layers deeper. I'm still learning things every day that I'm realizing that I didn't know. Yeah. So there's a lot more to it. You want someone who has done the training, has done the certification, who actually knows a little bit, knows all the layers of the onion to peel back. So like we talked about, lifestyle, nutrition, fitness, hormones, cellular health, genomics, gut health, toxicities, exposures, all these different, and that's a lot. It's hard, and you may not find someone who has a handle on everything, but maybe they have a handle on 5 out of the 6 things or something like that. Yeah. Ask them, how many patients do you treat with XYZ? For example, I was asked earlier about do you take care of women with PCOS? Yeah, every week. It's a very common thing, but a lot of people don't. Some people just do, women, or just do men, or just do certain niches. And yeah, most of mine, I'd say probably I have a lot of men. I have a big population of men, but I treat a lot of women too. So they're both big groups. So again, you want someone who's got that experience and has trained and been certified and, taken the courses and done the training and all these things. And actually, and that's one of the first questions, how many patients do you treat with my condition? How many patients do you treat with, whatever it is they're going on? How often do you see this? What kind of, what have you done to learn about this? Ask those kinds of questions. And if it's kind of like, well, I just, if they can't answer that, then maybe they're not. So, but again, you can find someone if they cover most of it, that's a good place to start. You can always fill it in with someone else. For example, you need to see someone who's an expert in mold, for example. I'm not a mold expert. I know enough about to get the ball rolling, but I'm not a mold expert. If someone has a really bad mold thing, I'm going to probably send them to one of my colleagues who is a mold expert, or whatever that may be. You know what I mean? But those are the things that aren't terribly they're common, but not as common. Most of my people are the very common things. They're metabolically challenged or having issues, whether it's hormonal or, lifestyle related or whatever that may be. So those are, I guess, some of probably the bigger questions, and like we talked about, the other big one is that you want someone who's going to listen to you and treat the person. You don't want someone just going to read things off a lab. Oh, lab's normal. You're good. You're out. No, there's more to it than that. I want someone who's going to listen to me, and if they're not finding answers, dig a little deeper. Okay, everything seems to be normal here. The lab's okay, but you're still having symptoms. So let's dig a little deeper. Let's do some additional testing, or we're going to try this therapeutic strategy and see if it works. Someone's going to take it to the next level, not just say, well, I don't know what to tell you. And if they don't, that's fine. I'll be the first to admit, if I don't know something, I'll tell them I don't know it, but you at least know what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why they call it practicing medicine, right? We're
right.
learning
about
new things, right? Well, even now things are bubbling up that we thought the last 30 years were, the best science at the time, or what the best food or replacements to. I think we even touched on it last time around, like fake butters, like margarine was
right.
That was going to help your cholesterol. That was
right.
probably the worst thing you could eat.
Yeah, I lived through that time. It was all low fat, low fat, low fat. And now we've learned that was the totally wrong direction.
Yeah.
I think right now the big thing is the gut, right? The microbiome. And I think, there's tons of stuff out there, but, even myself and all the colleagues who are in this field, they've told me the same thing. Like, we're just beginning to learn. 10 years from now, we're going to be like blown away by what we know. And looking back now at 2020, we're like, what the hell were you guys doing X, Y, Z, So
yeah.
There's always more to it, for sure. But that's I think just always be learning. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm probably reading right now I'm reading 3 different books. I'm doing 2 or 3 different online courses that I'm in conferences. I'm still rewatching. It's just there's almost too much out there. So don't listen, again, there's a lot of good people, on social media who are not clinicians, but they have some good things. But when it comes to medical advice, don't play around. You want someone who's a clinician. They know what the heck they're doing, and take care of your body and invest the time and do it right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this conversation, Eric.
Absolutely.
I think it's really helpful for me personally, and I'm sure the men or women out there listening to really have a better handle on, the prostate and ED. And it's just something that's serious, needs to be taken care of, and can have, corollary effects to other things that are equally concerning, as you talked about.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And one thing we didn't even touch on is the whole, we're talking about lifestyle, right? Well, psychosocial and emotional and psychological factors come into play too. And that might be causing the problem, but it can also cause other problems. If I have women that they just don't want to have sex because their vaginal tissue is too dry and it's too painful, that can cause some problems. Same with the men. They're having problems with erections and they can't have that emotional connection.
Yeah.
Yes, sex isn't everything, but it's important. And sometimes it's just that intimacy and that feeling of confidence and togetherness. And that can cause, I've seen it. I've had patients come in, they tell me I'm about ready to go Splitsville here until we fix this. So it's an emotional thing. It's a psychosocial thing too. And
that's a great point. Because it connects to our identity as men and women.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So, think about it. If you're a guy and you're having problems, then that affects your confidence, right? And it's not just in the bedroom. You're going to be probably less confident in the gym, in the business room, whatever it is you do for work. It's going to affect every area of your life.
Yeah.
My mantra is, live to give. I want my patients to feel better, not just maybe losing weight or having better erections or lifting that brain. I want them to feel better everywhere. So now that they're feeling better, they're going to do everything better. They're going to be a better husband or wife. They're going to be a better partner. They're going to be a better businessman or whatever it is that they do. They're going to be a better, husband or your father or mother to their children. And then they're going to make that person feel good. And then they're going to feel good and they're going to spread it forward. So pass it forward. Right. So that's kind of my huge mission. I want everybody to feel good and live to give and pass it forward. So it's about enhancing every aspect of their life and making them feel better, making them feel confident, living better, living stronger, and then hopefully passing that little wave of happiness on to someone else.
Well, I am behind you 100%. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it's the basis of my position as a non-professional, but just really learning through my own experience around the things that you advocate, you support in the medical field, and just living a healthy lifestyle. It's important.
Oh, it is. Yeah, no. And your podcast is great. I've listened to it and your show and some of the things we were talking about earlier, things that you've delved into. It's awesome. And I applaud you for what you're doing, getting the message out to people and promoting all the things that you talk about and everything that we talk about, because it's important and people need to hear from different fronts and different angles, not just from the doctor, but from other people too. And it's kind of like one of those things that, like, man, everybody's talking about, whatever, and maybe I should listen. Yeah. Listen up, Yeah. So.
And don't sit back and accept mediocrity. I mean, we have one of these lives. And,
for sure.
There's going to be moments of downtime or sickness or what have you, but it doesn't have to be a systemic thing.
I love it. Yeah, well said. I agree completely.
Well, Eric, I asked these questions last time. You said you're reading a ton of stuff, but what are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm finishing up. I finished an old book on cortisol, safe uses of cortisol, a whole book about iodine by Dr. Brownstein, kind of a forgotten nutrient that's been used for hundreds of years with great success. And I can't remember, I'm blank at the Clinical Atlas of Endocrinology. I haven't opened it yet. It's an old book from I can't remember now, the early 20th century, but pictures and some studies that you just don't see in medical textbooks anymore. So again, I'm learning from the past. And then I've got some newer books too, like a couple of the ones you got behind you there. I got to read one of those. I won at a little contest we did at a conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then I'm also rereading the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone.
Yes. Yeah.
I've read that a couple of times already, but at night I try to do some of my motivational type books. So it's always a good refresher, to kind of push me forward a little bit. So
cool. All right. So what are you listening to right now?
I listen to a whole bunch of different podcasts and, medical, business, real estate, fitness, nutrition. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm always listening to podcasts, but I also get a lot of books on tape. I'm re-listening to, I think I've listened to it 3 times right now, the 48 Laws of Power. Have you ever heard that one?
Yes. I'm actually just about starting to go through that now with a mastermind group I'm part of. Actually what we were talking about before in Ryan Mickler's group.
Yeah. Okay.
We're covering that book.
It's an awesome book. I've got both books and I've listened to the audiobook. The second one is 48 Laws of War. That one's really good too. But man, obviously there's some great lessons there, and, take it for what it's worth. Obviously it could be spun, into a nefarious kind of pathway if you want, but I think it's more for recognizing when people are trying to manipulate you and learning how to take control of your life, kind of like similar to like the 10X rule, right? Control your life, control everything. Don't let people control you.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's a great resread. Yeah, you'll really enjoy it.
Awesome. Okay, last one. What is your rest and recovery podcast, rest and recovery method right now?
One thing I've been getting back into again. About a month ago, I started doing a cold shower every morning.
Okay.
I get up, I do some breathing exercise like we were talking about. Get the blood flowing, a couple of things, and then I'll jump in the cold shower for maybe just a couple minutes, and then I'll get on with my day. And then later in the day, what I try, because I typically work out in the morning, and then at the evening time is when my kind of chill time. What I've been trying to, I didn't do it tonight yet, but last week I was doing it intermittently, but I was trying to do some infrared sauna. Try to do at least 4 or 5 times a week in the evening. For recovery and also to promote sleep. I came across someone who told me that oftentimes the sauna a few hours before bed can help promote sleep. And I've been working on because my sleep's been a little chaotic of late too. So I've been trying to do different things, tracking with the Aura Ring and all these different things. So trying to do cold in the morning, heat in the evening. And sometimes I'll even end the sauna. I'll jump in a shower and I'll do just maybe 10 seconds of cold, and helps me sleep. So those are probably the biggest ones I'm doing right now. I am actually seeing a colleague of mine who's a chiropractor and getting some adjustments and some minor things like that. That's something I don't always do, but periodically I'll do that. But I'd say the biggest ones are the breathing, cold shower, and the sauna.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would love to be able to do you have your own sauna?
I did. I bit the bullet a few years ago and bought one. It's a small one, but it's perfect for what I need. So
yeah, that's one thing that I think I would like and would use.
I think it'd be worth. Yeah, it's definitely worth getting. It's right up your alley, man. You got to get one.
Well, Eric, always a pleasure to chat, and
Sure.
appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can. We'll do it again. Happy to talk about. If there's anything you or your listeners want me to touch on, I'd be happy to discuss it.
Great. All right, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.